Hello everyone, I am Vaishnavi Avasi from National Institute of Science Education and Research. Today we are going to talk about typecasting. Let's get started. Typecasting is conversion of one data type into another data type. So either it can be done by the computer or it can be done by the user-defined data type. So by this process we have two divisions, implicit data typecasting and explicit typecasting. So we are going to start with explicit typecasting. What is explicit typecasting? Explicit typecasting is when the user is defining its own data type, not own data type, user is defining the another data type which he or she wants to be in the output. So for the sake of simplicity, let's take an example. So for example, say we have a variable in int data type A, and suppose its value is 3, and another variable B in int data type we have, so let's say its value is 2. So if we see out the operation A divided by B, what we are going to have as an output, let's see. So output is going to be obviously in int data type because we have not changed any data type. So output will be 1. But we all know that 3 divided by 2 is not 1, it's 1.5. So to include that 0.5, to include the decimal values, we are supposed to change the data type. So we can include float or we can use double. Here we are going to include float. So for that there is a syntax. Explicit have a syntax of using after cout we are supposed to write define the type we are supposed to include in it. Again here will be the operation and then the semicolon to end the function. So now we are supposed to write it. So we are writing it as cout. Here will be float. This is a data type we want the output to be in. Here is the function A divided by B and then end it. So output will be 1.5, which is an integer, therefore a float value. So this is how explicit typecasting works. Here the user defines its own data type and then the outputs come accordingly. Now let's come to implicit typecasting. So for implicit typecasting, computer has a predefined algorithms according to which the computer decides the priority list which computer gives to data type, different data types. Suppose say for example we have a variable A in int data type. Again let's say for example its value is 3, but now there is another data type float and the variable is B. So let's say for example its value is 2. So now when we see out the function A divided by B, so what is now A is int, B is in float. So now computer will decide what should be the output, what should be the data type of output. For that computer has priority list. Basically priority list is based on the memory. More is the memory, the computer will select it as the data type of the output. So here float has greater memory as compared to int. So now the output will be in float. So if the output is in float data type, we will have the integer values. So the output will be 1.5. So now in implicit typecasting, we are supposed to have a priority list which is predefined by which is based on predefined algorithm by the computer, and accordingly computer decides what should be the data type of the output. So just now we have seen the priority table. Now let's see how the priority table works. Here is an example which will help us to understand how actually priority table works. So in example we have character into long double plus float divided by integer into long integer into double. So from the priority table we know that the data type who have the capacity to store maximum memory would be in the top in the priority list. So from these two we know that long double have more memory capacity, storage capacity. So from here long double will come. Plus from here we know that float is a bigger data type which stores more memory. So float will come. And from here we know that double will come. So from float and double, float is a greater data type, so float will come. And this operation we have done first. Now long double from long double. So from long double and float is a greater data type which comes in higher ranking in priority list. So our output will be n float data type. So that's how the priority list come into existence, and that's how the priority list works. To be more clear between implicit and explicit typecasting, let's take an example. Here in example I have an int data type, a variable of int data type whose value is 3, a variable b of float data type whose value is 2, a character c whose value I have assigned a. Also we have to know that the ASCII value of a is 65. Now let's see out this following functions. If we see out a divided by b, we know that this is an implicit typecasting, and here float will be in the dominating function. So the output will be 1.5, a floating value. So output will be 1.5. So now in second, cout for we have defined the data type over here. So this is an explicit typecasting. So now as we have defined the data type to be int, the value will be 1 in the integer value. So the output will be 1. Now cout of a plus c. Our a is 3 and c is a, whose value is 65. Now c is the character value and a is integer value. We all know that integer has greatest memory storage capacity than character. So here the value will be, the output which we'll be getting will be in integer data type. So the output will be 68. Now the last example, now in which we have defined the data type. So this is an explicit typecasting, or yes, so this is an explicit typecasting, and the value of because 68, the 68 ASCII value 68 denotes capital D, so here the output will be capital D. So this is the following example which help us to clarify our doubt between implicit and explicit typecasting. This is an implicit typecasting, this is explicit typecasting, this is implicit typecasting, this is explicit typecasting. Thank you.